everyone. I'm Julie Parascondola, the Kent Parks Director. I'm here today to read you a Christmas story. Christmas is one of my favorite times of the year, and this is one of my all-time favorites that I like to read to my children and now my grandchildren. I am reading The Polar Express, written and illustrated by Chris Alsberg. On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quiet in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets, and I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound a friend told me I'd never hear, the ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. There is no Santa, my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear a sound, though not of ringing bells. From outside came the sounds of hissing steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window and saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. It was wrapped in an apron of steam, and snowflakes fell lightly around it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a pocket watch from his vest and then looked up at my window. I put on my slippers and robe, and I tiptoed down the stairs and out the door. "All aboard!" the conductor cried, and I ran up to him. "Well," he said, "are you coming?" "Where?" I asked. "Why, to the North Pole, of course," was his answer. "This is the Polar Express." I took his hand outstretched and he pulled me aboard. The train was filled with other children, all in their pajamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols and ate candies with nougat centers as white as snow. We drank hot chocolate that was thick and rich like melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights and towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northward. Soon, though, there were no more lights to be seen. We traveled through cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. Soon, we climbed mountains so high, it seemed as if we would scrape the moon, but the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. The mountains turned into hills, and the hills to snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the Great Polar Ice Cap. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea. "There," said the conductor, "is the North Pole." The North Pole. Wow. It was a huge city, standing alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made. But at first we saw no elves. "They are gathering at the center of the city," the conductor told us. "That is where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas." "Who receives the first gift?" we all asked. The conductor answered, "He will choose one of you." "Look," shouted one of the children, "the elves!" Outside, we saw hundreds of elves. As our train grew closer to the center of the North Pole, we slowed down to a crawl. So crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. When the Polar Express could go no further, we stopped and the conductor led us outside. We pressed through a large crowd at the edge of a large open circle, and in front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and paced, ringing the silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses. It was a magical sound, like nothing I'd ever heard before. Across the circle, the elves moved apart and Santa Claus appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us and pointing to me, he said, "Let's have this fellow here." So he jumped back in his sleigh and the conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee and he asked, "Now, what would you like for Christmas?" I knew that I could have any gift I could imagine. But the one thing I wanted most for Christmas was not in Santa's giant bag. What I wanted more than anything was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. When I asked Santa, he smiled. And then he gave me a hug and told an elf to cut a bell from the reindeer's harness. And the elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood holding the bell high above him and called out, "The first gift of Christmas!" A clock struck midnight as the elves roared their approval. Santa handed the bell to me and I put it in my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from the sleigh, and Santa shouted at the reindeers' names and cracked his whip. The team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled above us and then disappeared into the cold, dark polar sky. As soon as we were back on the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell. Except for I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I found was a hole. I had lost the silver bell from Santa Claus's sleigh. "Well, let's hurry up and look for it outside," one of the children said. But the train gave a sudden lurch forward and we started moving. We were on our way home now. It broke my heart to lose the bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children and I stood at the doorway and I waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the train, but I couldn't hear him. "What?" I yelled. And he cupped his hands around his mouth and he said, "Merry Christmas!" And the Polar Express let a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents. And when it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found a last small box hidden behind the tree, and it had my name on it. And it was the silver bell. Then there was a note inside. "Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C." I shook the bell, and it made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," my father said, "it's broken." When I'd shaken the bell, my parents had not heard a sound. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bells, but as years passed, it fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear the sweet sound. Though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me as it does for all of those who truly believe. Can you hear the silver bells ringing? The end. Happy holidays.